that we've been doing. We're then going to turn it over to the panel. Each panelist will present. I might have a couple questions, and then most importantly, we're going to turn it over to all of you. If you look at Northeast Philadelphia, since its founding, the way that the Northeast has moved to its next brighter, better chapter has almost entirely been through the development of large-scale transportation infrastructure projects. Almost solely. And by the way, at almost every turn, each of those projects was pretty controversial because in the end, it connected us. There was a bit of the unknown. And whenever you have unknown, you're gonna have folks who are scared and worried about what that might present. But each time it worked, and it improved the Northeast, it improved our city, and connected us to surrounding neighborhoods. So the first, right, was the Boulevard, actually. At the time, the Boulevard was a pretty transformational project. And then subsequent to that, we had many extensions of the Boulevard. We had the Market Frankfurt L and the Tacony Palmyra Bridge. Each of those transformed Northeast Philadelphia, and I would say our region. The issue, though, is we haven't had one of those projects in a long time. And if you think about, many of you are young, I don't know how many of you, well, how many of the younger folks in the room live in the Northeast? Okay, some. How many of you are thinking about moving to the Northeast? Oh, this is like the best audience ever, right? Now, for a lot of folks who might go to one of the schools in our region, might be from a different part of the country, I think that people are looking for the Northeast to be connected in a real way to the rest of the city. Because connection doesn't just mean that you have a beautiful looking, sleek subway or monorail up and down the boulevard. It means access. It means access to jobs and health care. That's what the boulevard and this project, rapid transit up and down the boulevard, mean to me. In order to get more and more people to embrace that type of vision, what we've been trying to do is organize town halls that try and touch upon different aspects of the boulevard, right? So the first one was very advocate-driven. Almost everyone on the panel was pretty much sold on the idea, and they were talking to folks about why it was so important to be an advocate for rapid transit along the boulevard. Our second town hall was a little different, where we were looking at different aspects of development along the boulevard, but we tried to also get much more community engagement, where we had breakout sessions and people came back and said, here's what we like, here's what we think need to be done along the boulevard. And the big difference between the first and second is we had a lot more stakeholder input. So a lot of the institutional players were at our second town hall: SEPTA, Otis, PennDOT. Here, we're trying to nuance it again by getting different parts of what change along the boulevard would mean, what it could mean for our city and our region. We good so far? Any questions about what I've said? Anyone want to add any comments? Okay, great. So now I'm going to move to our panelists. And then again, questions, and then we're going to open it up to all of you. before we get started with the panels, just in terms of guidelines for the discussion, we did this at the first town hall. This I think goes without saying, but we want to all be respectful. If you have a comment, just don't interrupt anyone else. No yelling, screaming. I know the Boulevard's a very hot topic. I usually want to yell and scream, but if I try and control myself. Allow others to express their opinions, and when you do make a comment, if you could just limit your comment to one question or one insight that you'd like to bring to the group. Is that all fair to everybody? We good? Anyone want to add anything in terms of guidelines? Okay, great. Let's go to the panels. So Jay, you're going to go a larger presentation, so I'm going to save you for last. Is that good? Okay. First up, Toyin Ogun Faluju. Did I get that close?
Close.
Can I try one more time?
Yes.
Okay. Toyin Ogun Faluju. Better?
Better.
Say it correctly.
Ogun Falaju.
Ogun Falaju. Thank you, Toyin. We're thrilled to have Toyin here. Toyin is the director of Social Value and Equity. Is the director of Social Value and Equity Americas at Jacobs. She has expertise in executive leadership, community engagement, and operations management. She's called upon to analyze critical requirements, identify areas of opportunity, generate solutions, and implement programs. We're thrilled, Toyin, that you're here. You have the floor. Please welcome Toyin.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to see you all in the room. Like Representative mentioned, I'm Toyin Ogun Falaju. I am a program director for Jacobs, and if you were wondering what Jacobs does, I would say you probably might have heard of us, seen us in the engineering and architecture space. But we do a whole lot of things, and we are a global firm, and we do have a social value and equity practice. So what does that mean? That means what we typically like to do is, especially in potential large-scale infrastructure projects like this, we like to do three things as far as making sure that equity is considered throughout the process, right? Not necessarily trying to retrofit it, right, after things are under construction or whatnot. And so we think about equity in infrastructure in three ways. One, making sure that conversations like this are happening early on as far as developing the vision for what this infrastructure could look like. What are the strategies that this community and other stakeholders want to attempt to deploy in order to make this sort of infrastructure equitable to the greater community. And so that might also look like partnering with different organizations and other entities to do things like seek funding that's not purely just for funding the infrastructure itself, but funding things like a workforce development program that aligns with such an investment. So vision and strategy. Second piece is in the planning and the design piece of all of this. And so that is that inclusive design, literally the technical part of where are you going to have this infrastructure be located? Is that adversely creating barriers for the community? Is that potentially decreasing things like air quality? Is it increasing the potential for well-being? Is it increasing not only the possibility of jobs, but actually careers that are for today and then into the future, especially when you think about the energy transition, right? Getting folks ready for what that looks like. And then last but not least, that project delivery piece, right? So again, thinking about what is the workforce development implications of such an investment, right? So not deciding, a week before construction begins that suddenly there are construction jobs, and so you start advertising. It's getting the local residents prepared, trained, upskilled, reskilled, whatever is necessary, in conjunction with community-based organizations, right? Who know their people, who know the local residents, and then things like how are the contracts being published and posted, right? Does that leave room for small, diverse businesses to potentially engage in some of this work? So that's just a couple of things, a couple of ways to which my organization approaches
Thank you so much, Lauren. I appreciate it. We'll come back to you in a little bit. Next up, we have Nicole Brunette. She is the policy director for the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. Nicole believes in making the political process more accessible for all, through city public hearings, the voting booth, and accessing basic city services. So please, let's all welcome Nicole.
As Representative said, my name is Nicole Bernay. I'm the policy director. I also oversee Transit Forward Philadelphia, our transit advocacy arm. But my main goal is to advocate for safe infrastructure for the most vulnerable road user. So that could be a pedestrian, someone getting onto public transportation, or somebody on a bicycle. The work that the Bicycle Coalition has done in the Northeast has been mainly around making roads safer for that community and reducing speeding on the boulevard. The boulevard is the most dangerous road in our city. Cars go very fast, and there's 12 lanes, which creates a lot of challenges when you're thinking about how do we make it safer for the people who are traveling along the boulevard, but as well the people that live in and around the area. And so the work that we've done is mainly around raising voices of the people that live here and uplifting projects that are currently on the table. So there are a good amount of federal dollars coming into the boulevard to redesign some of the most dangerous intersections. I think they've already started some construction around Potman to make it easier and safer for pedestrians to cross the boulevard, and as well look at how do people use this boulevard and how best to suit everybody. And then the next biggest thing that we've been working on is the automated speed enforcement. So together with Families for Safe Streets, we have successfully passed a pilot to get the automated speed cameras on the boulevard. But the pilot is set to expire this year, so our main goal right now is to not let that happen. So we will be going to Harrisburg and talking to anybody who will listen about this issue, to not just keep the cameras on Roosevelt Boulevard, but to expand this program to all of Philadelphia, and if there's potential to bring it to other cities as well. This program has been hugely successful in reducing speeding on the boulevard, but as well reducing serious injuries and fatalities. I believe it's that the serious injuries and fatalities have decreased 16% since the cameras have been utilized on the boulevard, and it's significantly different than the rest of the city. We've seen increases in serious injuries and fatalities on our roads throughout the city, but we've actually seen a decrease here on the boulevard. That's not to say it's not still an incredibly dangerous road, and there's a lot of different things that can be done to make it safer, but this is just one piece of the puzzle. The goal of the automated speed enforcement program is not to make money, but in fact to make $0 and not to give out any tickets. And within the first year of getting the program up and running, we saw a 93% decrease in tickets. That's a 93% decrease in people who are going at least 11 miles over the speed limit. So this is a very exciting program, but again, we need to see it continued. We don't want it to have an end date. This is life-saving technology, but it is just one piece of the puzzle, and we want to see other ways to protect pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users on the boulevard.
Thank you, Nicole. Next up, we have Mike Parker. Mike Parker serves as America's infrastructure leader for Ernst & Young and is a recognized leader on the funding, finance, and development of large-scale infrastructure projects, including investing billions of dollars of projects now in service or under development. Mike is here in his personal capacity as a West Philadelphia resident and a Philly's public school dad who believes in the power of infrastructure to change communities. So anything he says, we need to attribute to Ernst & Young. and they will fully fund the boulevard. Mike?
Thank you all for the chance to be with you this morning and to represent Solomon for this conversation. I think our and my role typically in projects is not the hard part of digging and building and operating what's built, or designing and planning it thoughtfully, and so forth, or even building the coalitions to do that. As those things come together, though, a critical barrier and a critical opportunity is how do we pay for it? Can it be paid for? And then how do we procure it and enter into commercial relationships that are transparent, that protect the public good, but that also allow the private sector to step forward and to deliver in a way that makes sense. And so I think now's a very exciting time to be working in infrastructure. If there was a word diagram for like infrastructure, it was like once in a while the State of the Union speech or what did it even mean. Now it's like really big, and like that's come to the center. And we had the bipartisan infrastructure law representing well over $1 trillion of new funding for infrastructure, including $550 billion that was incremental new, much of it for transit and transportation. And with executive orders focused from a Justice 40 standpoint on communities that have been left behind. And so while I believe in the power of infrastructure to change communities, we also have to acknowledge that it hasn't always been for the better. And that's the case with Roosevelt Boulevard today in many ways. It's an important thoroughfare, but for these same reasons that we're talking about safety, it's a very challenging corridor as well. And so I think the first message is that Philadelphia is not alone in doing this. Toronto, over $50 billion of new transit. Austin, $8 billion now. LA Metro recently, Los Angeles, another $100 billion. We just convened a conversation in New York with the deputy mayor, the head of the Gateway program, it's a new tunnel under the Hudson, and the head of MTA's capital construction program. That's approximately $150 billion of new infrastructure they have in plan. The MTA alone has $55 billion for the next 5 years of capital works that they're planning to do. Some of it very large projects, some of it smaller. And so I think when we spoke at one point, you pointed out to me, we demand excellence of our sports teams here. The idea that we're going to compete against cities and ourselves not be able to step forward in infrastructure look aheads there. So for this project, I think part of what we'll start to talk about is how do you put that layer cake together of funding and commitments, and to make sure if it does involve, the project's certainly going to increase real estate opportunities all along the corridor. At the same time, how to, the scale of those is something that we'll have to be grappled with to make sure that they're relevant to the community too. There's a potential for private sector revenue. There's certainly a huge potential for federal dollars. And I guess I would argue, in my personal capacity, that Philadelphia does not get its fair share because we don't have projects that are fundable and big enough to ask for. And so I think the next thing that's really important is you have to time your run. And so this project is not going to go into construction until we're actually talking about the next infrastructure bill. So there are significant funds that can help advance it now. There's also significant conversations that are going to happen in the state about funding overall for transportation. And so getting this project to a point where it is ready and it is imminent, and I think based on the work that was done before, it looks like it would provide greater ridership, greater access to jobs, and more significantly align with the climate change and the equity goals that have been set forth in the infrastructure bill and in executive orders than many other projects around the country. And so I think I'm looking forward to this conversation, but I guess my simple message is that the vision, until we press on it further and find that it's not what was studied before, it looks very compelling and it looks very competitive with what other regions are proposing. And Philadelphia certainly is a very large and significant one with greater poverty than many areas in the country, and one that merits that kind of investment nationally.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Next up, we have Jay Arzu, graduate of Marist College. He has begun his PhD in City and Regional Planning at the University of Pennsylvania. Jay is the Chief Marketing Officer and co-founder of the Collective Forum, a walkable urbanism and community engagement platform where he handles strategic initiatives, equity management, and community engagement. Let's say hello again to Jay.
I could just present. All right, everybody. So, you could just draw your attention here. Thank you. So, if you had the opportunity to come here and, look at this graphic, you know that we're talking about a 15-mile subway stretching from Broad Street all the way to Lower Bucks County, then the Chamonix Mall area, and of course, an extension of the Market-Frankford line 1 mile north to Bustleton Junction, where there will be a major interchange. But what we're going to talk about here very briefly is this potential station designs and how that could affect the community. So bear with me, please. So, just going back to just the origins of rapid transit on Roosevelt Boulevard, this photo is from 1913, and in this photo you see the median, the 80-foot median here, that has an elevated train, as it was first imagined and envisioned in 1913, an elevated train along Roosevelt Boulevard. But that 80-foot median was meant for rapid transit. So we'll fast forward to the 1948 plan. Here it's shown is a potential rising sun station. And as you can see, it's still a median dwelling station. There's a station house. And closer look here, excuse me, you can see 2 tracks, a station house in the center median. So to play off of this in a modern context, this is how, in a sense, we can imagine the boulevard looking with a subway in the median and, of course, a linear park and bus lanes adjacent to it, so that it's more attractive for the community, that community members can actually walk around and use it and see art, that kind of thing. So what I'm going to show you next is just potential, renders of how this could potentially look in the median of Roosevelt Boulevard. So let's check it out. So boom, this first photo is of an enclosed glass structure leading down to a subway. This is very doable with the 80 feet that we have in the median. And here is another photo of an enclosed glass structure. You can clearly see the tracks here and the escalators, but you can understand the idea. But one thing that we will have to think about in regards to the location and where we put these stations is its location adjacent to streets. So as you can see here, a 600-foot platform is not going to necessarily stretch between Rising Sun and C Street. So we would have to figure out where we want to place these stations strategically to bus connections and that sort of thing as well. And I will stop there and hand the floor back to the representative.
Okay, so some brief questions, and then we're going to turn it over to all of you. Twin, when you talk about equity, so the boulevard is a very long stretch, and one would assume that any form of rapid transit, we would see businesses prop up and down the boulevard. There would be developers who would want to take advantage of what now could be the largest development project in a generation, right? This could last 10 years, if not more, and completely transform the communities that run up and down the spine of the boulevard. How do you get it right when you're dealing with so many different communities, in a community that's so diverse, in communities where there are really some serious language barriers? How would we even begin the process?
Just in rooms like this, right? And much like what I talked about, having those conversations early, which sounds like the first town hall, or maybe the second one especially, was that, right? Having these breakout sessions, but really kind of figuring out, right, who are the major players here. Obviously, SEPTA is going to be at the minimum a owner, right, of said system, but there are other folks maximize the benefit of this particular investment here. And so you want to look at things that are definitely tied directly to the line, right? So the accessibility piece, right? The environmental justice pieces of that, right? Et cetera, et cetera. But then what are the potential investments as far as partnerships with businesses, being located, expanding their services to this area that would allow for, again, that job creation piece, right? Maybe it's the investment of educational institutions, right? Locating some of their campuses or facilities in this area. What would that investment, how would that impact? Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. How would that investment impact, you mentioned health as a piece of this conversation, and so what are those social determinants of health? We know health is a major issue in Philadelphia. How could we get folks not only access to health, but how could this improve health within the city of Philadelphia? So I think there's just, the sky is the limit here. I've heard of some models out west in which they are strategically looking at where their public works utilities assets lay, and where there's no use of those properties, they're looking to convert some of those. Number one, the ones that are located off of transit lines, they're looking to repurpose those empty lots to build housing for the unsheltered population, right? So just thinking a bit more creatively about what are the social impacts that just think about, take out the boulevard in the conversation and go, what are our challenges here? And how can this investment help to mitigate, improve those challenges that our city of Philadelphia faces?
Thank you, Toya. Did anyone else on the panel want to weigh in on that particular question?
Talk too much. So.
No, you can talk. No, more. We want more. If you want to pass the mic to Nicole. Nicole, there are very few, we don't see a lot of bikes on Roosevelt Boulevard. Right, it would be pretty terrifying, harrowing. Right. What could you potentially envision in terms of protected bike lanes up and down the boulevard? Is there a vision there that might be workable?
It's a humongous amount of space, so you can put anything. There's 12 lanes of traffic. To have 12 lanes of traffic run through a neighborhood is just already wild. And it does so much to separate the communities. So before I even want to talk about putting bike infrastructure, I say we have to get rid of lanes of traffic. But with that, you have to give people different options. And so I think that though, I'm coming from the Bicycle Coalition, I'll say that this is further down the list. You have to figure out the best way to move people. This is a long stretch to say, like, you're gonna go all the way from Neshaminy down to Erie on a bike. That's something that not everybody can do. I don't think I can do that. So I think the biggest conversation is how do we reduce the number of travel lanes, make it easier to cross, and how do we give people a real option to get to where they need to be that rapid bus, subway, or above ground rail. And it has to be something that is efficient and reliable, that people can say, yes, I feel like I can choose not to get in my car today. This is a real choice for me. And then once we've figured out how to move people and we've slowed down traffic, then we can talk about how we can increase the amount of pedestrians and bicycles. But first and foremost, we have to deal with that factor.
Excellent. No, thank you. Mike, you talked about large-scale infrastructure development in other cities and the funding that's needed to support those large-scale infrastructure projects. Can you explain one of the projects you worked on and the difference in the funding mechanism for some of those cities. You talked about Toronto and Austin, LA, and New York, which when they see those billion-dollar price tags, they say, yes, let's get this done. Why are they able to do it and we are not in our city?
So I don't want to, I don't want to presume causality or ones that within Philadelphia. There's often myriad reasons, and some. Oh, is this there?
Yeah.
It is.
You got it.
That's my mouth. Okay. Good. Sorry about that. So first of all, I think there's myriad, sort of, there's many stories of why something doesn't happen, and Philadelphia has many of its own. But in many regions, often a package of projects comes together. And so from a federal standpoint, I guess the federal government, if you have to have projects that are gonna be competitive, and the federal government's intending to act as a catalyst. There's money out there, and there's two types of federal money, and then I'll come back to what happens in a region. So the federal side, there's grants and there's loans, broadly speaking. And the grants can come in and usually will be a third to a half of the project, depending on how you're thinking about it. Some of the grants can be for planning, but then ultimately grants can be to deliver critical new infrastructure. As we saw recently on another project here, that infrastructure often has to be competitive relative to the metrics of how it serves people. It has to be cost effective for the number of people that are going to use it and for the outcomes that it's going to achieve. So, but that can act as a catalyst. The federal loans can allow local communities or private developers or private sector funds or some mix of all of that to be advanced on a low-cost basis. You can look out over 35 years or beyond. The TIFIA loan right now, some cases can go 75 years, but generally the construction duration plus another 35 years. So 40 years at the federal government's cost of borrowing, you can get money. And so that makes sense because we benefit from the infrastructure over time, right? So we can't all pay for it as our generation when folks are benefiting from it in the future, but we can make a commitment over that time. And sometimes you need to see the development benefit to be able to pay it back. So often what we see in these other regions, and we saw, I think in the last cycle, one source that I was looking at had about 80% of all ballot measures related to transit funding passed in 2022. And this has been the case for a number of years. Usually things don't come to the ballot when they're not right. And often when they do at a regional basis, which isn't always what would be necessary in Philadelphia, but in other regions, it's been that there are a group of projects that benefit different parts of the city and that will work together over time. Inevitably, they're in different stages of planning too, so it's one package, but they're not all gonna happen in the same minute. And I think the first question is, what has been Philadelphia's ask, even as we look at regional opportunities and regional projects. And so it could be that this project stands on its own in the merits, and then you're starting to look at, well, how far out does it extend? Does it extend outside the city? Are there other stakeholders who would want to support or co-fund? What will be the development implications? Are there ways to make sure that that's equitably contributed? But ultimately, there's a federal piece that will come in very heavily. It also could be that there are other projects, and whether it's to other parts of the city, to the Navy Yard, and even this project could be running through and be part of an extension of the Broad Street line, and other projects that are in different counties. And at some point, SEPT is a regional body, and so that's the other side. So I don't want to go too deep, but I think having a project that actually works on the merits and that the community supports is the first critical piece. And so many projects, we say, why did it take so long to plan? If you step back, there actually just wasn't agreement on doing the project or what the project should be. And so I think the fact that it's starting at a community level, or restarting anyway from the early 1900s, coming forward, is an incredibly important strength for this project, let alone its merits.
If you want to hand the mic to Jay, please. Jay, a lot of people, when they hear about a subway in particular, and I'm taking this off of what I saw, bless you, saw on social media, people say the current subway in L is not safe, it's not clean, I don't want to ride it. And an expansion of it is not a good idea. Can you address those concerns?
Yes, I can, State Representative. So first and foremost, It's very obvious of recent that SEPTA is serious about change, no pun intended. And, you know, they're trying their best, you know, to clean stations. They've been showing this on social media. You know, a lot of people's concerns about safety on, you know, the subways, you know, it's geared towards what they see on television, and, you know, they're not actually riding the system. You know, if we have more people riding the system, it's going to be safer. We need more eyes, in a sense, on the road. So building this subway and having potentially 100K or more riders riding daily means more people on the subway, means more improvements to stations. And I think that's a step in the right direction, and a step that we need to create the tens of thousands of jobs that would help keep this region competitive. We need that.
Okay, I want to now open it up to all of you. Questions, comments, issues, please. Just name and question or comment.
My name is Justin Roy. Close enough? I'll try and keep this comment as brief as possible. But basically, the comment I want to make is regarding something I don't think we discuss enough regarding the building the Roosevelt Boulevard subway, and that's integration. How do we better integrate Northeast Philadelphia into the rest of the fabric of the city? By fighting at the grassroots. The Roosevelt Boulevard subway in the past was just a dream of planners. It's no longer just a dream of planners, it's also a dream of residents of the Northeast, of other parts of the city. Historically, the Northeast was viewed as a sundown town. It wasn't as diverse as it is today. And to this day, the Roosevelt Boulevard still serves as a divider between communities, between Oxford Circle, or, you know, to the other side of the boulevard, or residents in Beltonville or Logan, et cetera, et cetera. How do we better serve the Northeast with this subway? And how do we it's not just a road across, or, you know, a train across the boulevard, but it can also be a bridge down, but also a bridge across the boulevard. And having it at the grassroots level is going to be the difference that we can actually get this subway built this time. And my only call to action to everybody here is, if you do support the subway, go to your representatives in Harrisburg that can help us fight for this on the state level. I was in Harrisburg on Wednesday, and I heard a representative from the Northeast, and no, I'm not going to say who he was a nice guy, but he told me that we're probably going to be waiting another 100 years more. It's great that we have Representative Sullivan fighting for this on the state level, but we're going to need more allies in Harrisburg if we're going to get this done. And just to go back to the point of integration, I'm a Temple student. I don't live in Northeast Philadelphia. I like Northeast Philadelphia. It's a place I would like to live, especially if there is going to be a Roosevelt Boulevard subway built. But how do we, a lot of Temple students and any students in the city could get opportunities in the Northeast, and the Northeast could benefit with the opportunities that these schools have to offer in the schools. We have a shortage of workers right now. We have plenty of young kids that are itching to look for jobs, but the main problem is transportation. So how do we bridge these gaps? We build a subway. And to finish off this statement, before I get a little too long-winded, if we can build a subway on the Roosevelt Boulevard, we can build one anywhere. 12 lanes. That thing was a Strode from day one. If we can build a subway on the boulevard, the sky's the limit. There is not anything we cannot do in this city if we can conquer that behemoth, that Goliath. Thank you very much.
And I want to get our panelists to respond, but first I forgot to recognize, so Councilman Harity in the back here, thank you for being here. We have representatives from Senator Tartaglione's office. We have Councilman Driscoll's office. And we have people who are running for office. I see Melissa and Rue, and I don't know if anybody else. Is anyone thinking about running for office? Now, 5 years from now? I don't want to get in trouble for not recognizing anyone. So thank you all for being here. I thought great, thoughtful comment. Any response from the panel?
That mic is still not on.
It's not.
Oh. Hello, hello, can you hear? Oh, man, that's.
Turn it on.
Hello? Okay, so I'm just gonna have to talk louder. Yeah, I'm gonna project. In response to your statement, I totally agree. I think we definitely need to be talking about integration and all the economic benefits that come along with it. I think that that's one thing that is true, and one thing that was complained about at the last meeting, at the first meeting, was that we had high school students that came to the meeting and said, hey, we can't get to the opportunities in the city, and also at the same time, there's other high schools that get to have Temple students and Penn students and LaSalle students. They never come to Northeast because they can't get here or it takes them too long to get home. So I totally agree with you, I sympathize with you, and we need to be better for our students and our residents. We need to build the Roosevelt Boulevard subway.
Other comments from anyone? Nicole?
Yeah, I'll just add that over 30% of Philadelphians don't own a car. Either that's a choice or they can't afford to own a car. And only allowing one way to really get to this part of the city limits who can get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can close that gap a little, you know.
Gary Barbera.
But economically, it doesn't make sense to force people to buy cars. I know who you are.
How do you want?
Great.
And we all ride bikes.
Love to see
And we
it.
support you guys through that.
Mike or Toy, anything?
I do have a lot of comments.
Absolutely. Other comments? Yes, please. I don't, just name and comment or question. Yeah.
Jared Johnson, volunteer Fifth Square, and it's more like a statement than a question, so.
Sure.
I might piggyback on what the last guy said, first guy said, but I'm gonna try to do it a little differently. So anyway,
There you go.
I'm in full support of the Boulevard subway because there are so many people that don't own cars that would like to have a job or can't drive that would like to work around here. So if we gotta get this right, because if we fall back this time, then we're gonna fall behind the other cities like Chicago and Los Angeles and New York. And I'm a transit nerd by choice, and I do a lot of searching on different transit agencies. Take example, Chicago, CTA. They have 10 different subway lines that go all around the city and all around the region and to a different state, I believe. And they have high ridership, same as New York and Los Angeles. And Los Angeles keeps on building and building. The MTA in Los Angeles, they keep on building and building. And I also looked up the website for the Roosevelt Mall and what they're trying to do for their $50 million project. And to me, it feels like it's a waste, because I go to the Philadelphia Mills pretty much every weekend. I take SEPTA. I take the bus to Franklin Mills. So I know how wide it is, and I also get a glimpse of the Roosevelt Mall right now. And that place is dead. I mean, people around Northeast Philadelphia would go to Franklin Mills or the Chamonix Mall. So adding this subway will relieve congestion and will give people the opportunity to get a job, probably a high-paying job, that they couldn't do otherwise or would take too long. So, and that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Any response? Anybody? No, we're good. Next comment? Yep. Just name, comment, question.
My name is John DeLong, and you talk about a project needing to be competitive. So how can Philadelphia be competitive? Like, would we have to upzone a lot of areas, provide more infrastructure to put a lot of infrastructure in place already to help kind of facilitate getting this project ready? How would we approach these next steps?
Mike, you want to take this?
First of all, All right. Look, I'm trying to figure out, my name is Mike, I'm trying to get my skills here. So, it's a great question. And by competitive, actually, what I mean is really on the merits of what is the impact of this project. And so, how many people will it move relative to its cost? Whom does it serve? What are the economic benefits that it unlocks? What are the safety benefits that it unlocks? What are the climate change or greenhouse gas emission reduction benefits that it might plus? And so I think this project, one of the reasons that I'm excited about it is that there aren't too many new things to do in America right now in some of our biggest cities. Some of it that are legacy, that have legacy systems. Some of them are already built out. Some of the cities developed around those systems. But this corridor has the need and the density for it, and it lacks that transportation. And so I think sometimes we'll think about, as we work on regional planning ideas, the number of jobs that will be within 20 or 30 minutes of a person's home from the increase in transit access. And so the change here would potentially be massive. And the effectiveness, the types of improvements that might be needed might be things like rerouting of buses to feed these types of stations and showing that commitment. Certainly having a credible plan at the right time for where additional funding comes from, locally and state, is going to be important too. But fundamentally, there's some projects that are better ideas than others, and there's some projects that make the whole network more effective.
Okay, let's go over.
My name is Kay Lasker. Right now we have regional rail, and the big problem for people to use it is no parking. If it's disabled old people, they can't walk 5 blocks because you can't find parking for 5 blocks. So in designing these stations, have you thought about how you're going to handle parking? Because people are going to have to get there to use the station.
People that are going to drive, yeah.
Thank you. I think also the federal dollars, some of the federal dollars that just came in, some of that will be dedicated to ADA accessibility.
So we want to always make sure that, we are, listening to different voices in the room. So I totally understand, and I want to make sure that we acknowledge you. In terms of parking, at least for the contemporary movement, we think that having a larger parking deck at Woodhaven Station adjacent to Woodhaven Road, maybe even having a direct connection between Woodhaven Road and this new Woodhaven Station would be appropriate, and that would probably have thousands of spots for parking and easy accessibility to the station. So we are thinking about those things, and of course, when design of the system happens, we will need you and other community members to come and support that as well. But know that you're acknowledged, and this is something we're thinking about as well.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is David. I've been living in the Northeast ever since I was born. And even though I really like it, I feel like we need to actually build up on the transit here. I've been talking about this for years. I would like to note that there's a bus route that SEPTA currently has. Know where it connects. It's the Route 1, ironically named after US Route 1, and it runs from Parks Casino all the way down to 54th and City. It's a cross-town route that connects northeast, north, some of northwest, and I think southwest, and some of west. Anyway, so currently that bus route goes from Parks Casino, kind of goes down, similar to like how that map goes down the boulevard, and it stops at Hunting Park for the Broad Street line. So it kind of does some of what this route already does, of what this subway line is supposed to do. And a lot of riders take it, because every time I take the one, it's always crowded. However, SEPTA's new bus revolution project, they're talking, it has some good stuff in there, I'm not gonna lie, but they're talking about getting rid of this route. And we're not even near the point of building the subway line yet. So my question is, should we try and keep Route 1 until this project is built? Because so far that's really the only route that we have up here that does that. Because I'm thinking about moving out of the Northeast since there's not really that much transit up here. Cause like I love the Northeast, but there's not that much transit up here and things like that. And I do plan on driving in the future, but I don't want to have to drive everywhere. I live in a big city. I should have no reason to have to drive everywhere I want to go to. So I believe that we should try and preserve at least what we have so far. But if we can't do that, then I don't think I can live up here. So should we try and keep SEPTA Route 1 until we get this built? Or at least try and fight to keep it?
Comments?
So there's actually someone who wants to comment.
Oh,
Okay, sure.
Hi, my name's Michael, and I live down in North Philly, and I occasionally travel the entire length of the boulevard, for work purposes up to that Salem. And my response to the Route 1 question is that Route 1 is great when it runs, which is basically in rush hours, and then outside of rush hours, it runs maybe once an hour. SEPTA is, yes, it is not looking to continue the Route 1 service, but it's being replaced by more frequent, more all-day, everyday services that will hopefully be a better bridge to a future subway than the current infrequent Route 1. And I know it's really fun. It's really great when that schedule aligns. But when I'm coming up here, it's never at rush hour, so I feel the pain of that infrequent schedule a lot. So I get that having to bounce through regular transportation centers is not anyone's favorite thing. That's why we want a subway. But that's my response to that comment.
Thank you. Let's go right here.
Hi, Jen Reagan. I think a lot of people in this room know that the subway idea is large, transformative. And Philadelphia, for better or worse, sometimes has this, we're not good enough or we can't do these big, great things. It's bull. But I want to know, and I think Mike, you touched on this, given the need to build this giant layer cake of funding with city electeds, state level electeds, federal dollars, and a regional transportation network, who champions such a thing? Who leads such a thing? Does anybody know that answer? Who can bring this together is my question. Bring in the funding necessary to move this forward.
Thank you, Jen. I have something to say on that too, but first panel. Oh, yeah, I mean, we do. So one of the reasons I think that, and I agree with what you said, where Jen, which is that whereas other cities, Colorado, LA, Denver, LA, New York, when they see billion-dollar projects, they say, yes, let's do this. When we see a billion-dollar project, the first issue is, well, what's going to happen with parking, which I get. Parking is important, I get it. But when you're talking about large transformational projects, sometimes we've got to move through parking, and I think that we just say, oh, it's too expensive. We can't possibly do that in Philadelphia. There is, of course, the reality of the funding mechanism at the state, right? If you were at our last town hall and you compare the big cities and the transit-related funding coming into those cities compared to what Pennsylvania does, it's pretty minuscule. So I think that it begins and ends, though, with us. One of the reasons that I think the KOP project initially got approved is because you had a bunch of folks in that region and elected officials who would not accept no for an answer. And when people said no, they said, let's do this. And other people said no, they said, yeah, well, actually, we're going to get this done. Whereas unfortunately, what we've seen in the Northeast is we will get diverted because there will be a group of folks who don't think it's a good idea. At this point, we need to build a chorus of people who are saying yes to large-scale transformational projects. So I think the funding mechanism begins with the people in this room. We can't accept no for an answer. It just can't be no. And we will find a way to get to yes through federal, state, local dollars. But if we get diverted, that's when these projects go south. So it's consistent, it's loud, and it is a sense of we are a growing group in the Northeast and beyond that is going to get this done. Yes. Oh, did you want to say anything? Did you want to agree with everything I said?
Hi, my name is Dan, and the state rep had just pointed out maybe we don't take no for an answer, and we eventually get to a chorus of yeses. The northern end of that extent is, in general, has more wealth and political control than the southern end of that extent. Suppose we all get to a yes, but the yes is conditional in such a way that the northern end, which is the greater Northeast, wields more control and better amenities or conditions that will go into construction or even just maintenance in its lifetime. How to protect the interests of the entire corridor, but especially the southern extent from the northern end. Is there any mechanism for that?
That's a really good point. So far in these town halls, and we haven't done one in the greater Northeast, but so far we usually poll people, and we always said, well, what do you want? Do you want a subway? Do you want a monorail? Do you want more easier access with some sort of trolley line up and down the spine of the boulevard? What's that?
Light rail.
Right.
Or LRT.
Elevated line. And then we have one, always no change. No change. And we've only had 2 people who have said no change. And we asked, well, why? And they said, well, we just don't like change in anything. And that's a fair position, right? It has nothing to do with the boulevard. They just don't want anything to change. And they agreed, you know, boulevard is not perfect as it's currently constructed, but then they added, but I don't want to see a disruption of life up and down the boulevard, and it's just easier sort of to accept the reality that we have. But those were 2 folks. I think that broadening the message is really important, and taking this roadshow to other parts of the Northeast is really important, because we've been concentrated in lower Northeast Philadelphia. And so as that moves, we have to be willing to embrace people who might not think it's a good idea, and find a way to get them to join this group to say, look, we're going to take your concerns, right? This comes back to what Glenn was talking about, right? Which is, how do we build a group, a growing group, that will take in some folks who are naysayers, but find a way to get them to yes. I think it really is doable. Did anyone know anything else on that comment?
I was just gonna say, I'd rather tell the story that you did, the coalition got built, you got trained for the job, you got out for the job, and then you showed up, and maybe you got the no, and then you had to figure out what the next level right, as opposed to not going anywhere because of what you think might be the barrier. So that was just it.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's go here, and then we'll go back.
Yes, my name is Dale Wallace. This young man is my son. But that's not why I wanted the mic.
That would have been okay.
I was thinking maybe, anyone think maybe we could get the corporations or some of the business alliances up and down the boulevard in the neighborhoods, maybe get them to use some of their political capital to feed in on this? Maybe that should be our next step too. Because with the extension, you know, that's gonna be more people that will come and patronize their businesses, maybe, I don't know, Mr. Butler over here, you might have some, I mean, you should
Jared.
get it, oh,
There you
Jared,
go.
I'm sorry. I mean, I was just thinking, in that way, you know how people a lot of times feel locked out by corporations. This way, we're all working together, the people in the community, the corporations. That's how it should be anyway in a picture-perfect world, and we're all in this together.
Yes, that is, I agree with that. I think Jay, you mentioned this in I think it was an editorial, which is, right, so we have the 250th birthday of the US coming up in 2026. In theory, that needs to be a time where everybody, communities, businesses, nonprofits are all pointed in the same direction towards celebrating the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the US. Why can't we use that rallying moment to push for rapid transit on the boulevard? It's not gonna come back again. The beauty of about 2026, you can't like push back the 250th birthday of the US. Right, government's great, we always push things back. Well, we'll get to it next year. You actually can't push that back. So is that a way to rally people towards this cause? Because it's an end date. It's an end date. We don't have to worry about tomorrow, we just have to worry about getting towards 2026. Maybe that addresses some of those issues where we can kind of galvanize support and drive the businesses, not just in the Northeast, but beyond towards this vision. Let's go back here.
Hi, I'm June Fortunato. I would say I am 100% public transit all the time. It's because of the climate, and it is also cost. I don't feel like paying a lot of money for insurance, so I don't get a car. Okay, my concerns would be, one, the magic is in the design. If the stations, for example, utilize buildings that are already empty, for example, the Big K, the empty Big K that's been empty for I don't know how many years. You know, if it utilizes these off the boulevard locations, then you don't have the sightline problem in the center, which is people trying to cross the street to get there, getting run over. We haven't addressed in this city, which is getting worse every day, the crazy driving, the really loud cars that they trick out to go through our soul, and you know, and the ATVs we know about, but it's the cars. They're, you know, these kids who are proving they're whatever they are. So we need to address all of it, and I think the person who said parking, it's part of the design. You know, it's like if you're in a wheelchair, how do you get to this station? Are you gonna cross the Roosevelt Boulevard in your wheelchair to get to? It has to be, you know, usable, walker friendly. Can't think, oh, well, you know, we'll worry about that later. It's all totally the picture, and encouraging the businesses to build around these things, to have cafes and parks and playgrounds around each stop so that it doesn't turn into Center City, City Hall, Broad Street line, which is, you know, I hate going in that station. It's so gross. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Anyone on design the call?
I'm loud. I can.
Okay, go for it.
I think that's a really great point, and something that we are worried about, increasing pedestrian crossing of the boulevard without shrinking it and without reducing lanes enough. still puts pedestrians in a dangerous right of way. I mean, it goes back to that this humongous boulevard runs through real communities and it divides communities, and it can be, we can use this opportunity to reconnect spaces, but we really need to be serious about it and pull things closer together. And that means looking at how much space or how much room it takes to cross the street, making sure that signals line up. There's a lot that needs to go into the safety of the individual person that's not inside the car. And some of that is already happening with Route for Change and with the federal dollars, $78 million coming into the $1 million coming to the boulevard. I was like, how much? But yes, there is and it's getting federal attention. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of other boulevards of death in other cities. New York has one. And it took a mayor saying, this is my main goal, is to fix this boulevard and make it usable and safe and accessible for people. And we need to think about the most vulnerable user, the person that can't get across in the time that's allowed for them. And the subway has, you have a way to do that, or if it's above ground, has a way to do that. And I think that the design is really crucial to thinking about these vulnerable communities.
And I think that all of the candidates for mayor were asked if they support rapid transit on the boulevard, and I believe they were all yes.
Well, 5 out of 6. Jeff Brown did it. He said he did it, of course.
He was a no?
He was a no, yeah.
What the heck?
Well, we know not.
Did he say what?
He's gonna lose it. No reason. Yeah.
Go here and then Melissa.
Hi, my name is LaTanya Bird. I'm a co-founder for Families for Safe Streets. I lost my family on the Roosevelt Boulevard, so I have been an advocate for getting the speed cameras along the Roosevelt Boulevard. And I'm running town halls for the subway because I don't know, I grew up in the city, I lived all over the city, and I thought, like you thought, the safety, how dirty it is sometimes down in the subway. However, someone said to me, what about people crossing safely? Because you can go down in the subway to get across sometimes to the other side of the street. So I thought about that and I said, you know what, that's a great idea. I take the Roosevelt Boulevard every day. I work at Red Line Road. I work at a school. Our students take 2.5 hours sometimes to get to school. 2.5 hours to get home. We have kids coming from Washington High School to our location to get training, and I fear because they have to cross the Roosevelt Boulevard to get to our side of the street. So I was thinking, when this came about, the subway ideal, has anyone thought about, I don't know the reason it came about in the first place. However, I'm thinking safety is the way to go, because I have traveled to Harrisburg lots of times, okay? That's how we got that bill passed. We have a lot of no's. People from other counties, other representatives from other counties had a say-so, which I didn't know until I kept going and going and going and visiting Republicans and Democrats and saying, you're not gonna give me enough. So that's what we did. I wrote letters, handwritten letters, had them delivered to these people who are gonna make that vote. I made phone calls. All these things may sound trivial, but it helped. And that's why we are here where we are today. The $78 million that the Roosevelt Boulevard got, that was one of our goals. We wanted federal dollars flown into Philadelphia. And we did that by the safe routes.
Safe Streets for All.
Right. Nicole works with us on that campaign. So all those visits, and that's our next plan. We're going to start visiting again, I believe in May, to fight to keep the cameras up. But also, it helped us get federal dollars. That $78 million, we were excited. Now, the $30 million that came in for the other parts of the Philadelphia and the community, the thing about that, I knew about it before it was gonna happen, before we knew about it here in Philadelphia, because I had a meeting with Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Now, Family for Safe Streets, when I decided to join it, there were only a few cities that were part of this. So at the time before the meeting, which was several months ago, there were 29 Family for Safe Streets. 10 of us were invited to have that meeting with him. We told our stories. We told him what we wanted. And it was all about safety. And it was about how they're designing cars and all those types of things. However, I think that if my group and everyone else can think about safety, how people are getting across from point A to point B, you know, saving people's lives, less people getting killed crossing the street. I'm not sure if this design is to take some of that, the lanes out or not, but that might be a great idea. And it all has to be about safety. So even if we're talking about safety, about people crossing the street, we have to think about the safety of when you go down in that subway. You know, we know the one, I take transit too, so it's like when you go down there, sometimes it's secluded, there's nobody there. Like, I don't know, it seems weird. Thousands of people ride it every day, but sometimes I get really afraid because I feel like I'm alone trying to go from, let's say, the Market Frankfurt line to the Broad Street line and things like that. So I just wanted to say something because I think that my group, we can get involved. We can talk about the safety piece of it because there's federal dollars for it. So that money we got was the first time, and I'm so excited. I'm following the lead of New York, okay? The Family for Safe Streets in New York, they have made so much progress. So that's who I meet with. I pretty much talk to them every week. We're starting a national organization, and the main goal is to get federal money to get what we want done for our infrastructure going forward. Thank you.
We'll take two more. It's really an honor that you're here. You have been a relentless, tireless champion. And I really can't imagine how that is with having to first deal with a loss of a family member and then
Four family members.
4 family members. And then
Drag racers. They were drag racing from Roosevelt Boulevard all the way down to 2nd and Masher, where my family was at. These guys were drag racing. And citizens like you, all walks of life, 2 years later, they came to the trial and they testified. So that helped our family because the community stuck together. And that community in that area, they were loud. So, you know, that helped.
But you found this voice and have continued this fight. So if you can do this with the tragedy you suffered, we need to uplift your voice and be all with you to bring the safety and security and the necessary changes to make life in this city better. Thank you for being here. We're going to go Melissa, John, and then I'll try and get you Harold, and then we'll close out.
Good afternoon, good morning rather. My name is Melissa Robbins. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to Representative Solomon for taking the lead with other people in the community and making this a thing. People are starting to pay attention citywide. I'm Melissa Robbins, community organizer. I am running for city council at large, and I do live right here in the Northeast. I live in Fox Chase. I've been raising my children here for over 12 years. So I rode a bike for many years. I've ridden my bike from the airport all the way here in the Fox Chase. I didn't have a car. My bike was stolen, so that means I had to take public transportation for many years. And my son, who at the time was 12, he was one of those kids that it took 2.5 hours one way from the Northeast to 43rd and Lancaster. So it was really tough with a 12-year-old kid traveling like that. But a couple of things that I noticed, now that I have a car and I do drive, I literally drive the entire boulevard literally just about every day. I notice everything. So cameras, that is so effective. It slows everybody down immediately. So as soon as you come off of, the expressway. But to you, I just want to say, I never met a family member of that tragedy. I will never forget that. If I'm not mistaken, it's the young lady who had her 5 kids crossing the boulevard. Okay. My family thought about that forever. We literally could never forget that. We were like, something has to change with Roosevelt Boulevard. So
when you, Representative Solomon, said it's important to have the loudest voices to get louder and amplified, I do agree. But I noticed something that's happening around the city increasingly. It's more and more polarized, just like our nation is. It's more and more polarized. It's either you're all the way in or you're all the way out. And that's a major problem because there has to be middle ground. I have to listen to you if I do not agree with you. I must listen to understand. And then you have to listen to understand. And then collectively, we have to move forth and unify with what is best for all. So I say, be very careful when you come into spaces and you say, let's get louder and louder, because sometimes voices who are vulnerable are silenced, they're left out, polling. You know, if you're, there is this thing called the digital divide. So you have older people who are not tech savvy. You have people who do not have access to the internet, and their voices are not heard. And I think it's critical to hear people, because those are the people who are most vulnerable, and those are the people who actually need mass trans, but they never have a voice in how it unfolds. So I just want to say, as a resident here, yes, we do need it. But we have to think about people like myself who had children and had to travel. I still needed a car. I understand the need to minimize pedestrian incidents, but consider the people who still need a vehicle. You must think about them. Everybody is not wealthy enough to live in their neighborhood and bike to work and walk to work, okay? Some people need to do the laundromat. Some people have to go to drop off groceries at mom's house and grandmom's house and pick up the kids. Consider the fact that we do need a main artery. We need an emergency route. We need a snow route. So when we're designing these huge monstrosities of mass trans, think about those people who still need to travel. And last thing, 2 months ago, I was coming off of Red Line, just driving down the boulevard, and not to shock you, but yes, there was a woman's body in the middle of the boulevard. So yes, I freaked out, jumped out, and I'm like, what the heck? What is going on? She was trying to cross the boulevard and got hit by a car. So we have to even though the red lights, the cameras slow it down, there's still, so when designing this, back to everybody's point, you have to have a way for the most vulnerable, because she was a senior, she was like 75 years old. We have to think about the time for the traffic signals and how much time people actually have who have walking, disabilities. So I think it's a great idea. I'll be very supportive, but please hear the voices of the most vulnerable who think opposite from you.
Thank you. Let's just really quick with comments, because we want to wrap and get you guys out of here. John.
Well, I don't have any.
Okay, go for it.
Hi everyone, I'm John. I actually used to work in Jared's office. I'm now finishing up my law degree at Temple. I have attended schools all over the city, and the biggest problem with getting there, I'm one of those kids who had to travel 2-3 hours total in a day just to get to and from Masterman, Central, whatever school throughout the city, let alone kids coming from other parts of the city, trying to get to Lincoln, trying to get to Northeast, which has over, I believe, maybe close to 5,000 students going there. A Roosevelt Boulevard subway, and I cannot reinforce this enough, will provide additional education and additional educational opportunities for the children of this city. And I'm not just talking about high school. It is a pain to get to CCP, it's a pain to get to Penn, it's a pain to get to Temple, it's a pain to get to Drexel and all of the other universities in this city. My wife works at Workshop School out in West Philly. We're living down in South Philly right now on the Broad Street line because it's easier for us for me to get to Temple and her to get out to the Workshop School. We're planning on moving back up here, planning to move to Mayfair, and the number one conversation we have is how is she going to get to Workshop School on time to be there to serve the children? And so if you have any inkling of not supporting this project in any way, or thinking about getting involved or not getting involved, let me encourage you to get involved, because not only will it stimulate the Philadelphia of today, it will stimulate the Philadelphia of tomorrow.
Harold Yaffe. I would like someone to explain to me what, besides the finances to make this happen, what are the objections of the people that don't want to have the the subway system. It seems like a no-brainer to me. So I just want to know what the opposition is.
Yeah, I'll lay out some of that. I mean, one is, there is the reality of, you're talking $3 to $4 billion, so money is a huge driver, right? You have to pay for this. 1, 2, the safety issues that we've been talking about. People will talk about that if you have an addition, more subway, more L, whatever it is, more rapid transit, that's going to bring safety issues, increased crime. You have many of the objections that I hear are actually the objections that we heard when the Market Frankfurt line, the L, was being proposed, which is that connecting Northeast Philly, connection is not a good thing. The Northeast, when it was originally constituted, right, if you think way back, the idea was that folks who were wealthy would escape the grit and grind of Center City and come to the bucolic Northeast Philly, right? Because this was, I mean, originally farmland. So the Northeast was sort of like removed from the city. And so the idea that we would be connected scared a lot of people. And remarkably, that has still driven a lot of the objection to rapid transit on the boulevard. I would say, have I missed any of the major objections?
That's it.
Right. I would say number 3 is probably the biggest driver. A lot of it's fear. And I think that the way that you address, in my opinion, you address fear by you confront it head on. And you talk to people who have these fears. You don't shy away from them. Last comments, and then we gotta close, so please, really quick.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I would like to bring a couple of points, which is actually Philadelphia has a different population. It has a morning population, and it has an evening population. And on the other hand, like speaking about the 12 lane, actually the 12 lane, when you think about the carbon footprint and where this project adds, the Roosevelt actually generate a lot of footprint, which if we think about carbon neutral or net zero, which is actually projected for 2050. And on the other hand, looking at the bigger, we zoom out, take a look at the bigger picture, where the project actually fit in the Philadelphia 2035 plan, which is very important. It's actually the timing wise, like generating a 15 miles of a project, like to fit the plan of 2035 actually is just right. Speaking of equities, there is a totally different equities nowadays. We're having social determinant of health. But transit equity is one of them. That's very important. A lot of people, a huge amount of population live along the Roosevelt. That would generate not just jobs to the cities, actually jobs the other way around. It's a two-way street kind of thing. Generating more projects and more jobs actually in the Northeast, where people actually could be from the city moving to the Northeast. Logistically wise, when you think about the traffic, like a lot of people think about the traffic when it comes to freeing the traffic on the Roosevelt, but actually no. If we think federally wise, 95 will be freed up. So logistically wise will make it faster for logistic delivery on 95 itself. So federally it has a lot of impact that we don't see directly. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, so a couple more quick. Promise will be quick.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Andrew Giraldi. I am inspired by the conversation that we're having today. I love the fact that we're all dotting our I's, crossing our T's to make this project happen. On that note, I'd like to suggest that one topic that we're missing is the idea of wayfinding and placemaking. The idea that don't live in the community, but I think that we all like to have an identity for where we live and to make sure that we're all getting around safely. The other point is that I love the conversation that we're having about competition. That if we're not asking for dollars, who is taking our money? That somebody when Baltimore lost their red line because someone denied funding, who took their money? And that's a question I pose to everybody in the audience. The final question is, and this is something that I think we're all touching on when it comes to ADA, parking, TOD, etc., is be careful about the incentives that we're offering people. The idea that when it comes to driving 40 miles per hour on Roosevelt Boulevard, the mindset for a driver is a different idea than going 40 miles per hour on just Tyson Avenue or Hawthorne, for instance. The psychology plays into how we behave. We're all fickle. We're all just trying to get by, but we don't understand sometimes what triggers us sometimes. And that's the final point. Thank you.
40 miles on Hawthorne, not that you go. Okay, last comment.
Oh, wait. Okay, I'll be quick. My name is Louis Brown. I'm a dermatologist in Philadelphia. And what I'd like to do is just give you a different perspective. I grew up in New York City on the Second Avenue, which I'm sure you know me, it has a subway line. And what I noticed in my over 40 years in Philadelphia in the medical school is that there's a mindset in Philadelphia that needs to change because there's certain externalities here that are just overwhelming. I mean, we're talking about not only the climate change issue, there's also the issue of education, racial equity, and also just the notion of even getting out of the car, I hate to say that, with the car mentality, and getting into the notion of using transportation as a way of getting around. For the first 22 years of my life, I never had a car, and I got around with public transportation. And I think that's something that we need to, in a sense, change our way of thinking about getting around. When I go to conferences in different cities, one of the things that I do is use public transportation to get around. So I think it's really a matter of changing our mindset and realizing that there's an entire new way of living and even getting, and for the new generation, it's actually a necessity that you have this type of public transportation for ecological reasons, but also for equity reasons.
First of all, just very impressed with the caliber and breadth of discussion that we've had today, and I think that's super important. I want to make just a few quick sort of finalizing points. The first is we've talked about being competitive, having a project that is competitive, and by that I meant versus other projects in this country, from the benefits relative to the cost. The cost can be big when the benefits are big. But I also think that I want to acknowledge very much, and just even hearing some of the discussion, that when we're talking about being competitive, when it's because whether it's safety or lack of access to schools or other things, we're really talking about impacts that we're and our children, our families are experiencing now and here. And so while I want to in some way celebrate that this project, I believe, would be competitive, that's an awful thing in a sense too, because it means we're not doing good enough now, and that people are losing their lives from a safety standpoint and in every other measure. And so I think there is an urgency to addressing those matters, and that's what it means to be competitive, is that relatively look around the country, where is the greatest need? And this is a significant area of need. So I think just to kind of not see it as a metric or statistic, but to understand that. And I think from that, then the next question was, really, how do we articulate, how does a coalition come together? Where's the champion? And your answer was, I thought, tremendous, and was exactly what is right here. Ultimately, there's some 400,000 people or more who are in the catchment of this project. If you think about it running all the way through Express and accelerating Broad Street line, let alone potential extensions to that, there's a tremendous number of people being impacted. And at that point, it's regional. And so the conversation does at some point in Chicago, the Chicago Civic Alliance, in New York, the Partnership for New York City, in Washington, D.C., what was the D.C. Olympic Committee became the Greater Washington Partnership, there was Board of Trade there. These are all large business organizations there. You can't grow the economy of Philadelphia at any level for small businesses or for large without making generational investments. And so I think that conversation will be there. But I do think, and maybe I don't live in the Northeast, I live in West Philly, but you don't do to the Northeast what the Northeast doesn't want done to it. And so I think at some point to reopen this conversation, and when it's community-led, I think you will find partners. I think the last part of that, though, is that at some point when something's a priority, historically in this region, there's been viewed as scarcity. And there is always scarcity. But at some points, it's actually having a collective vision is how you get folks on the same page. But sometimes you're also going to have to say no. And so if this region won't support things or won't support people who aren't in favor of this, then that gives you a seat at the table too. And sometimes you don't have the power to say yes on your own, but you may have the power to say no unless you support this too. And I think it is going to be a question as to whether or not it can rise to that priority. So, but I think when the project is ready, which is soon, I think it's there. And I think lastly, it's really important to begin restudying what the benefits are of this project. I saw the alternatives analysis that was done in 2000. A lot has changed. People work remotely. I believe actually this is a region where people who are many of our frontline workers in our schools, so forth, live and commute from. And so I think this project, if anything, will increase. But around the country, many projects that made sense don't make sense anymore because of that. And I think when you looked at that one, I think it was saying it would take 85,000 cars a day off the road, that it would have over 120,000 people using it. I mean, what are those numbers today? They're all forecasts, but I think refreshing that as soon as possible and being able to start advancing would be tremendous while you have this moment.
Jay, please.
Well, just to fully clarify, this is actually being studied now via the second phase of Route for Change. So we should be hearing back, it started in January, so we should be hearing back within the next couple of months with updated numbers and some of the things that that Mike is asking for and the community's asking for. So that's ongoing. So we're going to be looking for that. But I'll be brief. This year has been extremely significant for us transit-wise. This is the 110th anniversary of the Roosevelt Boulevard subway first being proposed in 1913, but it's also the anniversary of the Broad Street extension to the stadiums, which was done 50 years ago. So it's been 50 years since we built or extended our subway here in Philadelphia, and I think that that's a question and something that we have to think about. What type of region do we want to be? Do we want to grow our region out in a robust way that is equitable so that we can support future jobs and support, job creation here? We have to start talking about our future, and we need to start talking about fully funding SEPTA, which is one of the, things that I've been focusing on of recent, and thinking about State Representative Waxman's bill. Take a look at that. We need to fully fund, SEPTA. That's the first step to seeing the Roosevelt Boulevard subway completed, is to make sure that SEPTA is financially succinct and together, and I think that within this year or two, we can be able to do that so that by 2026, we can have the president here breaking ground on Roosevelt Boulevard and having tens of thousands of jobs along with it. So I hope that you can continue to work with me and work with State Representative Solomon and the great volunteers who are working on this project. So thank you.
And just to add about on to the 2026, remember it's not just a city quintennial, it's FIFA, it's All-Star Game.
Right.
There's just a lot that's going to be going on here, right? So Philly's going to definitely be on the map. And what is that going to look like? Just to keep it really brief for me, I always think that the one kind of tool I use to kind of keep focus is understanding what my North Star is in particular discussion or situation. And so for me, being in this room and hearing your comments and your questions about this project, I think the one North Star you all should, as individuals and as a community and as a region, maybe keep in mind is that what is the legacy that we all want to be leaving behind and moving forward, and that legacy I think needs to be what are the decisions that need to be made today that's going to uplift. Right? So uplift yourselves, uplift your families, uplift your community, therefore your region. So just one North Star to remember. Thanks.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for having me here. It's been definitely a really exciting conversation. And I think that, I mean, as we're talking, this is an exciting opportunity to reimagine a space that doesn't work for everybody right now. And I think this is an opportunity to make this arterial work for people, to be safe for people, to be accessible to people, to bring opportunity, to connect opportunity, and we have to take advantage of this opportunity, as we're all saying here. And for public transit's future, we're looming. There is a financial cliff that SEPTA is getting close to in 2025, that they need to change the way they get their funding sources. Or this won't happen and we'll start decreasing service, which is not what we want. So to be competitive, we also need Harrisburg to step up and to say that our region needs to be able to raise its own money so that we can compete on the federal level to get those federal dollars. So this is, you'll definitely hear more about this in the spring and the fall. But we can't have these big projects. We can't expand our public transit if we don't have the ability to raise our own funds.
Thank you to Nicole, Toy, and Jay, Mike. Thank you to my great staff for getting this event together. Jackson, Joe, Ton, are those, anyone else? Okay, sorry, okay. Rosemary, Mary, they're not here. So my wife got me this tie because she knows I love Roosevelt Boulevard, but so the tie doesn't have 12 lanes. So she'll get me one like that next time. I don't know, it could be wide enough to accommodate 12 lanes. But it does show the cars snarled up and down the boulevard. When I see Roosevelt Boulevard, and I know people in this room see the same thing, I just see the potential. I mean, those green spaces could be beautiful. And that could be a public works project like we have never seen before. There could be jobs for 10 or more years up and down that boulevard that will impact communities throughout our city, the environmental impact through the roof. In order to get this done, we need to stay together. And not just stay together, but we need to grow the number of people in this room each and every time to be true champions for a transformational project in our region. Thank you for the great discussion. Let's get this done together. Thanks so much.